God had rejected Saul. Had David anointed. He's the youngest of all of 7 brothers. He's the least likely one to be a king. When God told Samuel to go to Jesse's house, he had a king to anoint there. Samuel went, and Jesse, being a very proud man, brought his sons out before the prophet. Most likely, logic dictates that the oldest son will be the next king. He brought them out. God told Samuel that's not the one. So he brought another son out. God said no. He went through all 6 sons. I'm sure by now David, or Samuel, is probably wondering whether or not he was in God's will, just being there. So Samuel asked Jesse, he said, "You have any more sons?" This is about there's David. That right there is a picture of what David's image was like. He wasn't really counted as one of the 7 sons because he just wasn't a man. So they said, "Well, where's David?" He's up with the sheep. We gave David a job that David can't really mess up. Pretty much when the family, you try to give him a job they can't do too much damage to. That's how David was. In their eyes, he was not responsible. He just should not have been born. They called David in. The Bible says he's a ready-looking guy. History says he was red. Some say he had freckles. He had reddish brown hair. He was short. He was one of the kind of kids that was full of energy, like a puppy. Just couldn't shake him loose. This same David, when they had when that war with the Philistines, David was the runner for food. He brought lunch to his brothers and to the troops. Something he couldn't mess up. And David went out one day to bring his brothers lunch. That's when he first saw Goliath. And Goliath would come out every day, it was around noon, and he would defy the enemy, the armies of God, and challenge them to a fight. It's a different kind of war. Rather than have a great loss of life, what the Philistines offer is that you fight Goliath, you win, we serve you. Goliath wins, you serve us. Well, nobody wanted to fight this 12-foot giant. There'd be no contest. And David saw Goliath one day. He asked his brothers, "Who's this uncircumcised Philistine defying the arms of God?" It wasn't so much Goliath that bothered David. What bothered David is that anything could stop God's army. He took up a godly cause. He felt like God's army shouldn't be afraid of anybody. And neither should God's people. There's a song in the songbook, I'll never sing it. It's called "Hold the Fort." Hold the fort, for I am coming. Jesus whispers still. Send the signal back to heaven. By God's grace we will. The church is not on the defensive. Never has been. I want to sing a song for a while, which shows the real spirit of the church and leader. I only wrote the song. He wrote the words, "Mine eyes is in the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is tramping up the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He has loosed the terrible lightning of his faithful sword. His truth is marching on." We're not to defend anything. The church is not a defensive power. It's an offensive power. were to lead the way into the battle, whatever fight it is. And David had that spirit. So David's like, I'll kill him. They'll laugh. It was like that the first Godfather movie. When Michael Corleone said he'll shoot Cilantro and the chief of police. They said it's not like the military Michael when he had the M16 and shoot somebody a mile away. So he had to go up to him and get blood all over his suit. Michael said he made his case. You got people in the newspaper, this is a dirty cop, crooked cop, so on and so forth. And so Michael volunteered for the job. And they gave it to him. How many movie? Ebony? Where you should see him. Good movie. He came to the restroom and blazed away and walked out. That was that. That scene always reminds me of David with Goliath. David was a shepherd. He said, I killed a bear one time. A snake child. He said, I killed a lion one time. He said, this animal here, I'll take him out. So they gave David Saul's armor. His armor was too heavy for David to even put on. David said, I don't need that. So he went down to the brook and got 5 smooth stones. My dad preached that message. Dad was a very dramatic preacher. He said, getting 5 stones, J-E-S-U-S. Wound up and hit Goliath in his forehead. And the big giant fell to the earth. Then David took Goliath's sword and chopped his head off. A great victory. Sometimes those great victories in God cause us a lot of grief. And that victory caused David a lot of headache. Because they began singing songs about David. It says Saul killed his 1,000, but David killed his 10,000. After a while, Saul became very jealous of David and went on a mission to kill David. David played a harp. Sometimes when Saul was bothered by an evil spirit, he'd have David come in and play the harp and sing for him to soothe his spirit. One time David was singing for Saul, playing the harp. Saul took a javelin from the corner and threw it at David, tried to kill him. Imagine that. You're the king, been on king now, and he's on the run from the king that God has rejected. But David feared the Lord. As far as David was concerned, as long as Saul was alive, Saul was still God's anointed. And he had a chance to kill Saul several times. But he probably doesn't know it was in his hands to kill Saul. And when the day came, a man finally did kill Saul. If I'm mistaken, I could be wrong here, check me out, that David killed the man that killed Saul. Because again, Saul was God's original anointed. So then David became the king. And he ruled in Israel for 40 years. Most of his 40 years were years of battle, what happened. During that time though, David, again having a heart towards God, wanted to build God a house. He said, I'm laying here in my house with the high ceilings. He had high ceilings where they were popular. High beam ceilings, of cedar wood. Anybody have a cedar chest? Cedars, these don't smell, you know. They had a little bookstore in Ohio. They still little novelty things, like little tiny whales and stuff around. They were made of cedar. And I had more little cedar pieces in my house. In my room, I was about 13 then. I had a TV guide out. I got a piece of my TV guide out. I'll go to the bookstore and buy a piece of cedar. Just to smell it. You know? I can't imagine having a house with cedar beams. That just must be heaven, you know? And And David said, I'm in my fine house with cedar beams and everything. He said, and God is living in a tent. He told God, son, to build your house. Which again was showing his heart towards God. And God said, we can't do it though, David. You have blood on your hands. You're a warrior. He said, but your son Solomon, I'm going to have him build a house for me. Anyhow, this is a chapter out of David's life. The Bible is not only a Bible of truth, but it tells the truth about the characters in it. You ever wonder sometimes of your life, the worst parts of your life are written? For somebody to read for the next 3,000 or 4,000 years? That's me. I'm sure we do things a little differently. I'm sure when David gets to heaven, he's going to be real surprised by he's in the book. And that everybody knows what he did. Okay? Let's start the story. Chapter 11, 2 Samuel. We're back to our repentance series again. And it came to pass after the year was expired, at the time when kings go forth to battle, that David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel. And they destroyed the children of Ammon, what a word, and besieged Rabbah, but David tarried still at Jerusalem. And it came to pass in an evening tide that David arose from off his bed and walked upon the roof of the king's house. And from the roof he saw a woman washing herself. And the woman was very beautiful to look upon. Most relationships that start with looks end in tragedy. I advise all men to go a little further than just looking. Okay? Ask her name. Ask what she likes. Find out a little bit about her. You may decide you don't like her at all. You know? So looks is a monster. A lot of people got common looks in life. The story of Jacob. It says Jacob saw Rachel. It was love at first sight. Said he kissed her, lifted up his voice, and wept. That's the whole story right there. David would probably eventually wish he never saw Bathsheba, because he should have never seen her in the first place. There's some things you see in life, it's just best to turn your head and look away. Right away. And forget you saw it. And move on. You'll save yourself a multitude of headache. Anyhow, it says, and the woman was very beautiful to look on. Yeah, but can she talk? Can she add, subtract? Looks are fleeting. They change. Some wise person, he said, to marry somebody, or get with somebody, check out her mother. Because she's going to be like her mother pretty soon. And it's true, don't like her mother, leave her alone. Because eventually mother catches up with every woman. And every man. I married my brother the other day, last week, Sam. Numerous times I was talking stories. So he sent me some pictures that evening. I was sending him the pictures I got. And I looked at my picture, I'm talking to Sam. I looked like Dad talking to Sam, like an old man. And I told Sam, I said, Would I turn to my dad or what? So he had to take the back together right before our eyes. That's what I mean. He could see some LOL. I sent back Mr. Stevens said that was not capital or caps. Funny. That's funny, huh? David sent the choir after a woman, and one said, "Is not this Bathsheba?" Here's what's interesting. David sent somebody to inquire of the woman, but the one who said this was not the one he sent. It says, and one said, somebody else found about it already. Somebody else found about it just on the inquiry. This man, Bathsheba, Uriah's wife, what you been inquiring after her? Is not this Bathsheba the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah, the Hittite? And David sent messengers and took her. It's a real bold move. And she came in unto him, and he lay with her. For she was purified from her uncleanness, and she returned to her house. And the woman conceived, and sent and told David, and said, I am with child. I imagine now, she wasn't quite as fair to look upon as she was before. And each day she became less fair as her shape changed. I'm sure David thought from the day he just looked at her and wished he just looked and kept on moving. And David sent to Joab as the captain of his army, saying, send me Uriah the Hittite. And Joab sent Uriah to David. And when Uriah was coming unto him, David demanded of him how Joab did, how the people did, and how the war prospered. I was kind of thrown off by this. I didn't understand what the Lord was going to communicate. So I asked him. He said he was giving Uriah the impression that he might promote him over Joab. But he wasn't really pleased with Joab's performance. And David said to Uriah, go down to thy house and wash thy feet. He's giving him what's called a little R&R, okay? Nothing's worse when you go into the dirt to meet somebody that has more integrity than you do. Anybody know what I'm talking about? You think it's a person just like you, or less, and you find they're more honorable. They wouldn't do what you were doing. And this happened with Uriah. And Uriah departed out of the king's house, and there followed him a mess of meat from the king. That means a lot of meat. But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the king's servants of his lord, and went not down to his house. See what's up, clock. Go home, left your wife, and then when she announced she's pregnant, we can say it's yours. What a guy. Still his wife, just was pregnant. Nothing trying to do with that Uriah did. But Uriah did something different. Uriah didn't go home. He stepped outside the palace with the king's servants. I'm sure this was in his mind, but he had a whole bunch of witnesses all of a sudden. All the king's servants said, he didn't go home. No, he stepped up last night, right on the floor, at the door. And when they had told David, saying, Uriah went not down unto his house, David said to Uriah, camest thou not from thy journey? Why then didst thou not go down into thine house? And Uriah, now if I was David, these words would have killed me. And Uriah said unto David, the ark, and Israel, and Judah abide in tents. And my lord Joab, and the servants of my lord, are encamped in the open fields. So I then go into my house to eat, to drink, and to lie with my wife, as thou livest. And as I sow lyrics,